when I arrived in Thailand, I decided to run an experiment. I posted on a local Facebook group, "Hi, I'm Adi. I'm an architect. I'm going to be here for a few weeks. Just let me know if you need anything." And people reached out, and I was completely mind-blown. I didn't even have a website back then.
Wow.
Yeah, I guess I was onto something. I wasn't really sure what back then, but it became clearer and clearer with time. So there is this group of global citizens, of location-independent people, and they're seeking to create something that has both this global spirit of freedom, but also something that is very respectful towards the local heritage and culture.
I'm Brandon Vaidyanathan, and this is Beauty at Work, a podcast about how beauty shapes our world and the work that we do. In this season, we're looking at beauty in science, sponsored by Templeton Religion Trust and the Institute for Advanced Catholic Studies at the University of Southern California. More about them later in the show. Hey everybody, I'm so thrilled to introduce my guest today, Adi Cohen. She's the founder of The New Movement, an architecture studio that designs one-of-a-kind projects worldwide. She's the host of the podcast Go Out and Talk to Strangers, a TEDx speaker, a Forbes-featured passionate creator and free thinker. Adi is on a mission to create the most inspiring places on Earth, with the intention of using the built environment as a tool to help people thrive. Adi is a global citizen and the first architect to be living a nomadic lifestyle while working. She uses her travels as a source of inspiration, a way to connect to ancient wisdom and learn from local communities. Welcome, Adi. So good to have you on the podcast.
It's wonderful to be here, Brandon. Thank you for having me.
Well, no, really such an honor. So we're going to talk about beauty. We're going to talk about the work you do as an architect. You're going to talk about the nomadic way of working that you've been exploring in the last little while, and all the other cool stuff you've been doing. But let's get started from maybe from your childhood. If you could go back in time and think about things that have shaped your sense of what beauty means to you, experiences you've had, or moments or associations or images that you've had that linger with you till today. Like, what does beauty mean to you, and where did you encounter it when you were growing up?
That's such a good question. I guess I grew up in a small city where all the houses look alike. And from a very young age, I remember having this strong feeling of, I don't want to end up like this, So I guess for me, in a way, I joke around and I call it the Disney syndrome. There must be more to life than this, seeing my parents working so hard and everyone around me. And I was just like, I looked at it and I was like, is this really all there is? And that thought keeps going with me as I grow older. First day of school, remember sitting in a classroom and just being like really bored. You're not allowed to move. You can't even draw. And the teacher's like, look at me. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, this is how it's going to be from now on. Like and same thought happened again as I started working in an office space. So I guess, why am I telling you this? Because my own journey is a journey that goes through what's not working for me, what I don't find beautiful, what's not inspiring. And then you have to kind of reinvent it, right? You have to go out and explore and see what else life could be like. And I didn't had a specific vision in mind. It always was like what I don't want to do, and the rest is mystery. So I have to figure it out as I go. Yeah.
Were there moments though, like when you were growing up, where everything looked the same, where you experienced some contrast to where
Absolutely,
you saw something different, or what was that like? I mean, what was the thing that sparked your sense of there's got to be more? Were there pieces of evidence that you were collecting along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. So we used to travel a lot as a family. So every weekend we'll go somewhere else, a lot of nature, camping, being outdoors. And even in school, I remember climbing on trees and just sitting there, and the teachers would freak out and come there and yell at me and be like, calm that down. Because I don't know, there is something there that I find beautiful in that perspective, or, being like really high up on a tree, that I thought was beautiful. Another thing that I used to do as a child was I had this big window in my room, and I would just sit there and look at the neighbors' houses and see if I can tell who is about to switch on or off the light. I don't know why, it fascinated me.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah. It was just,
wow.
Welcome to my childhood.
That's great. Well, I think we've all had moments like that where there are things that we find mysterious about the world, and trying to predict things that are in the world around us. So how then did you get drawn into architecture? Were there experiences you had that led you to want to move into doing design, and what was that? What sparked your imagination there?
Architecture. So I was always interested in human beings, right? And when I was 20, I spent a year in India, and I just went one way, and I wanted to see how long would it take me until I get tired of traveling. And it took a while. And I explored
Where did you go? Tell me where you went.
So many places. I started with the famous places, right? Where tourists go through, north, and then Goa. And then I had this whole Buddhist phase where I went to monasteries and stayed there for a few months and discovered meditation. Then I started going to tribal areas near Kolkata. Like I went through, party phase, volunteering phase, hiking and mountain phase, because a year, it's a long time. And at some point, it felt like my hands are starting to itch. Like I had too much energy, and I was like, okay, I think I'm done reading books and getting into conversations with people. Like I want to do something, but I wasn't really sure what it is. And at the time, I was a bit against, just having a document from a university that tells you what you're good at. I had this romantic vision in mind of, I want to if I'll ever want to learn anything, I'll just find a master and, work my way into learning that thing, some sort of a apprenticeship, I think it's called.
Apprenticeship, yeah.
And then I was working in this studio for creating light fixtures from porcelain. And every day I would hitchhike home. And I liked engaging into conversations with strangers. That's something that I still do. It's even the name of my show. It's called Go Out and Talk to Strangers, because it's part of my life philosophy. It always exposed me to new views. And one day, someone kind of like planted this idea in my head. She's like, you don't have to get a degree, but maybe just take a class in something that you find interesting. And then it stayed with me. What do I find interesting? What do I find interesting? And architecture came to mind. Because my mom co-founded an ecological farm in Israel, educational farm. And I remember being very excited about sustainable design, but it always seemed not enough. It's always a bit tired. It's not as pretty as normal houses. And I just thought that we can do that better, in a sense that it's not a step down in how we live. Maybe we can make it even better than standard houses. And then I realized that it's 5 years to become an architect. And I was so scared of that commitment. And a very wise friend of mine advised me just to start, to do the first year and see how that goes. And I completely fell in love. Completely fell in love with architecture.
Yeah, why? Say what about it?
It was just so magical to be able to create spaces. We had a lot of, first year, it's a lot of foundation work. So history of architecture and arts and drawing lessons and the craziest ideas that you can imagine. It's like you're just starting. So they let you express all the wild things that you have in you. And that dynamic, it's like that building, the School of Architecture, had people 24 hours there. It was always the light is on. There was this collaborative spirit where you can always go to the third floor or to the first floor and talk to other people in 3 a.m. and brainstorm your projects. And it just completely lit me up. And I fell in love with doing that.
So you're talking to strangers all the time. You're building collaborative projects together. You're shaping the space around you. Did you? I mean, so it's a bit ironic though, because of there's such a commitment to place, right? With art, I mean, you have a building that stays in one place; it doesn't move around. And then there is your sort of nomadic spirit. Actually, I wanted to ask you about that a little bit, but. How did you reconcile that just with your own sort of interest in movement and travel and so on with the kind of commitment to place and space that architecture requires?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's always, that tension between being still and moving. And I think that this is where the essence of life is. So for me, I started by being still. The first job I got as an architect, I was a third-year student and I was presenting one of my projects in an exhibition. And someone walked up to me and said, "Who designed this?" And I said, "It's me." And he gave me his business card and he told me, "Call me." And this is how I started to work.
Wow.
And Brendan, I was so excited to finally start a real job with real buildings and, not cardboard and like design for real clients. Right. And life happened, I think as I started to experience the reality outside of the academic world, it was so different. We did creative work just a little portion of our time, and then the rest of the time you're just drawings and bureaucracy. And that's good. We need that. That's part of the training.
Sure.
But I felt unfulfilled for such a long time. Then I moved into a smaller firm. So it took me 7 years to admit that this is not working for me. And I became a partner. It was a long time. Then a personal crisis happened in my life. Me and my partner, we decided to split. And a dear friend of mine passed from cancer. And at that point, I was changing apartments in Tel Aviv. I'm from Israel originally, all the time. And it just felt like the city is trying to push me away, right? There was a 24-hour construction site in one apartment. Then I'd moved to a different one. And there was a club on the weekend that makes the building shake. And I just felt like,
wow,
enough is enough. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but it's definitely not living the same day over and over again. I'm going to sell all my belongings and get a one-way ticket to Japan. And I did.
Oh, wow.
And this is how I started.
Why Japan?
Oh, why not? It's like I was so fascinated by Japan and Japanese culture. And I think that deep down, I just wanted to be somewhere that is so radically different from everything I know and everything I ever experienced. Even the letters, you can't even read the letters. It's just something that is so radically different.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of my journey.
How long were you in Japan?
The maximum visa. So you get 90 days. On the 87th day, I was like, okay, it's time to go somewhere else.
Okay. And what did you do there? How did you So you mean you've come from this crisis, you've moved to a totally alien environment where you don't, did you speak the language at all, or how did you navigate?
Nothing.
How did you get? Yeah. So what was it like?
Oh man, it was feeling alive again. After being in an office environment for so long, under the fluorescent light with a fixed temperature, just in front of the screen, like you don't touch anything, you just touch keyboards or a little bit of paper. But it's a very, uninspiring environment for creative people. And all of a sudden I was in Tokyo I stayed there 5 or 6 weeks. And every day I would choose a map, a spot on Tokyo's map that I haven't been to before, just go there and wander around for hours without having a specific destination. And that act of, immersing yourself in new environment, meeting people and getting to know places, and visiting, incredible spaces like only Tokyo can offer, really, was just an experience of going back to my senses, to my body. I felt alive again. But again, I was still so confused about what's next for me. It's not that I knew that I'm going to do what I do now. Back then, I gave up the idea of being an architect because I was taught there is only one way of doing that.
Right.
Yeah. So I was in Tokyo.
Yeah. Wow.
Then I traveled to some other areas, and things started to shift when I met a couple who had just bought a hotel, and they asked me to help them with the design of the hotel. And that was the first sign that I can do both. The first sign that I can actually travel and work as an architect. And that was something that I had to validate again and again. We can go. I don't know how deep we want to go there because we also want to talk about beauty.
Yeah. Well, let's go in this direction. I mean, so what did you build? Because I mean, this led you to create something.
Yeah. So they just bought a hotel and they wanted to renovate it. And they had this idea, this plan to cancel the lobby and the common areas and create more rooms. Sounds great, right? No. So they told me, but we're not sure. Maybe you want to come and have a look and tell us what you think. So I went there, and what they did, the lobby, well, it did not did it. It's just the way the building was structured, is that the layout, all the public areas were behind closed doors. So you can't see them. It means that you can walk from the main door to your room and back out without having any social interaction. And obviously, it made people not use that space because they never remember it exists. So what we did, we changed the design of the floor and we made it more inviting and visual. It's a little bit like, how when you want to eat healthier and you put a bowl of fruit in your kitchen. So you see it, you remember to have some fruit from time to time. It's exactly the same. So whenever we see a space, it's an invitation to behave in a certain way or to engage with the world in a certain way. So we have to be very mindful of what are we creating and how people are responding to it. So that was just the first example. And another thing we did there, they had those IKEA cups. And I didn't realize, why? Apparently, that village is quite famous for ski, and they have many Australians coming in, and they say they keep on breaking glasses. And they didn't want to get the expensive ones. And I said, no, there's no way we're going to use that. We went to secondhand stores, and we found in Japan, you can find the most beautiful secondhand sets of teacups in those big wooden boxes. And it's just like $1 or $2, it's insane.
Wow.
And it's like, okay, we're getting rid of everything that is not local. I don't mind. If it breaks, we'll go back and we'll buy more. But we have to deliver an experience of being in Japan.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So how did that go? Tell me what that led to. Did you feel that was successful, and what did that lead you to build after?
So that was great. I left them with the instructions and blueprint and some aesthetics instructions, and then I kept traveling. And about a year later, they messaged me and they said, "You wouldn't believe the lobby is full all the time. There are people using it all the time." And I was just like, this is great. But at that time, I thought it's just a one-time thing. So I kept on traveling in Japan. And at some point, I couchsurfed somewhere in front of the art islands. And it's a funny story, right? So this couple, they used to live in San Francisco, and now they're back in Japan. And they have this vision where they want to... There's a phenomena where villages are getting abandoned because of young people moving to the cities. And they wanted to bring back that age group back to the village, back to live there. And they were trying to convincing the city hall to allow them to use this beautiful seafront building that used to be a hospital. And when they realized that I'm an architect, they asked me if I'm willing to do a consulting session with them and to record it so they can present it to the city hall. So we did that. that's the second time that I'm already using my skills as an architect. So when I arrived in Thailand, I decided to run an experiment. I posted on a local Facebook group, "Hi, I'm Adi. I'm an architect. I'm going to be here for a few weeks. Just let me know if you need anything." And people reached out, and I was completely mind-blown. I didn't even have a website back then.
Wow.
Yeah. I guess I was onto something. I wasn't really sure what back then, but it became clearer and clearer with time. So there is this group of global citizens, of location-independent people, and they're seeking to create something that has both this global spirit of freedom, but also something that is very respectful towards the local heritage and culture. And when they're looking for an architect, they're looking for someone who understands both worlds. And that was me for some of them. And then I made my part of the deal, which is I had a website planned, and I started spreading the word wherever I went. And also, I needed to change. You asked, how does it work, right? Because buildings, it takes time, and usually you have to stay there for a few years. So I had to find which part of architecture can I do on the go, or can I specialize in? And obviously, also my license does not apply globally, right? That's another thing.
Right.
So basically, it's the same model as the biggest firms in the world are using. Concept development, and then collaboration with a local firm that does execution and licensing. So I really did not invent anything. I just didn't wait for me to, I don't know, become this really big brand and then to receive the invites to go places. I just created those collaborations before. And that allows me to do what I love best, and that's design.
While also doing the traveling that you love to do.
Yes.
You're listening to Beauty at Work. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Templeton Religion Trust as part of a grant on the aesthetic dimensions of science. Templeton Religion Trust supports projects as well as storytelling related to projects that seek to enrich the conversation about religion. To learn more about them, visit templetonreligiontrust.org. This episode is also sponsored by the Institute for Advanced Catholic Studies, a global research center located at the University of Southern California. IACS works to create dialogue, spark ideas, and sustain academic research on Catholic thought, creative imagination, and lived experience. Learn more at iacs.usc.edu. If you're enjoying the show so far, please subscribe to our pod. Take a moment to leave us a review.
So let me ask you, just going back to Japan, I mean, so you've, because you've grown up, I mean, and again, I don't know, when you mentioned you were traveling with your parents, was it in Israel, or were you traveling around the world, or what was that like? I'm just curious to know how you reconciled aesthetic styles, and because they're so culturally specific, right? The things that we're used to in a particular culture might be very different from what others in different cultures find aesthetically pleasing. And so when it comes to design, did you find that to be a challenge, or moving from Israel to Japan, what was that like? So I'm just really curious to how that played a role.
Yeah, absolutely, great question. I never left Israel before that trip to India. We were just traveling in Israel, and mostly in nature. But you know what? I do think that we have different aesthetics with different cultures, but we also have subconscious tendencies as human beings. And there are some patterns that we all respond to because of the way we evolved. And when we design, we accommodate those, right? We always have to add the local layer, but underneath that, the aesthetic DNA of human beings is kind of similar. Do you agree?
Well, give me an example. So, I mean, I think you talked about the fruit bowl as being a kind of way in which the space we're in almost forces us to respond a certain way, or the lobby, right, where you create an open space that forces people to come to. Yeah. What are the other kinds of examples that you've used?
Oh, so many. So let's talk about an experience that everyone knows. For example, going into a supermarket, you feel overwhelmed, you turn right, you stick to a wall. That's something that we all do because that's safer. And we behave differently in spaces that we know and we don't know. And whenever you look at a public space and you can see where people are spending time with, there's an incredible documentary, I think it's from the 60s, called The Social Life of Small Urban Spaces. Have you watched it?
No.
No, it's wonderful. They're so insightful about how people behave in spaces and how they interact with each other and what they enjoy doing and what is that sense of agency that people have in a space and how they respond to the sun or sitting in the sun or having some shade.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about patterns, right? There is a pattern called prospect and refuge. Is that feeling of being protected from above and behind and overlooking a distant view. That is something that our neurobiological body responds to it so much. That's why we love, viewpoints.
Yeah, that's like where we met in Lisbon,
exactly.
Right? It was that sort of location. Yeah,
exactly. So imagine viewpoints, window seats. There is something irresistible about them, and tall men. Women that want to have a tall partner. It's the same pattern. Right. It's like, I want to feel protected. This is it. And we don't think about those things. But in design, actually in retail design, we think about it all the time, right? Like the scent design and shelving strategy and how we feel about things that are in eye level or above eye level or below eye level. But what if we use the same ideas for good, for creating inspiring places, for creating places that amplify well-being and mental and physical health? We can do that. We have the tools.
Right. Are there ways in which these insights have shaped your particular creative vision? Is there a way you would describe your distinctive architectural style, and does it cater to some of those elements?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't say it's a style, but I think it's an approach or a way to ask questions. As I said, I like asking questions. And on our website, there is an incomplete manifesto that keeps changing because of how knowledge keeps changing and how we are. But definitely to be able to tap into different cultures and places. Brendan, if you look at my world map where I've been, it looks like a kid drew on it. It's just so full of lines. And I find it incredible as a creative to be able to experience with all of my senses different places around the world, different scales and patterns and light and building techniques. And this is just like, mind-blowing. And as good as it gets, really, as a creative to be able to experience that. And what I noticed is that some places have that magnetic feeling, that timeless quality that we feel drawn to. And I think we all know it in our gut feeling when we see a place and you just go, oh, I love it here. Oh, I wish I could live here. We had that maybe in Italy. It's quite often that you go, you walk by a house or a balcony, you just think, oh, it would have been great to live here. And also the other experience of being somewhere and feeling contracted and restless, but it's all right. You don't know why you're feeling so weird, but you can't wait to leave this place. So we all had those experiences, and it has nothing to do with budget. And it made me think, okay, how can we create those kind of places? And it's just a set of, like so many different things that we can take under consideration depending on the site, the project, which kind of moments we want to create there. Where are we in the world? What time of the day people are going to use this building? There's so many factors to take into consideration.
Yeah. So it has to meet the specific needs of the people in that context and the purpose, I suppose. Are there particular projects, or is there one that comes to mind that you would consider beautiful, that you are especially proud of, or one that for you would exemplify what beauty looks like to you in your work?
Yeah. So I'm working now with a developer on this future of work concept. We started developing it at the studio. It's called the Irresistible Office. But actually what we're going to do there, it's this co-working space that's in nature. And why I think it's especially beautiful, it's because it invites people to rethink how we are operating in this world. We're all been through the cubicles, dark time in history. Let's not talk about it. It's definitely, not productive, not creative to feel that someone always looking over your shoulder and the corner office. And it's such an industrial mindset. And as we're shifting from quantity of hours to quality of work, and AI and all that is becoming part of our life, what is the human factor that we need to nourish? And that's creativity, that's agency, that's movement. We're not meant to sit for 10 hours a day. That's not how we are wired. That's not what, stimulate our brains. So we need to, how do we create a space where it invites people to incorporate movement into their day and to go into deep workflows and flow states, maybe if we allow them enough, and how a collaborative work looks like today. Right? As someone who works from her laptop in different places in the world, what will make me come to an office, right? Like meeting other people, brainstorming them, creating with them, and what kind of spaces are going to stimulate our senses and creativity and collaborative thinking. That's fun. That's something we can play with.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be beautiful because it's going to allow people not only visually pleasing, but also allow them to bring their full self to the workplace, to that company or retreat. Yeah. Very excited about this one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, rehumanizing work is certainly, the big challenge of the day, right? And you've also built this movement that the new movement. Could you talk about that and then the manifesto as well as, the way in which you're working in a nomadic, your process, I suppose, it involves so much movement. How does that look like, and what are you building there?
Sure, happy to share. So because of the way I like to live, or because the things that I find satisfying in my day-to-day, I also had to structure my business in a new way. And that's also thanks to other nomads and global citizens that I met along the way and had taught me a lot about how to manage remote teams, how to build a business that is scalable, right? So I don't hire based on location. I hire based on talent.
Yeah.
And there's so much talent in this world. I was like, it's mind-blowing. So for each project, we curate a specific team according to the project's needs. Makes sense, right? And then also we like to do some things that are not very common in the architecture world. For example, design sprints, using methods from design thinking. And why not do a 3-day workshop when you start a project on site with the founders, with experts, with, permaculturists and everyone we want to bring on board, and everyone prepares a presentation, and then we can brainstorm together and start the project from when we know so much more, instead mailing for months, just like, and things, to be able to celebrate creativity and collaboration in that way, and really to ideate and identify the problem that you're trying to solve in that specific project and how together we're going to do it. So that's part of the new movement. Wow. It's about not only the way we do things, but it's also about really rethinking and reimagining how would an office look like? How would a house look like? Maybe education, how people are studying. Maybe we can do that better. Maybe we can think about the future. We don't even know, future of work and all that. We say that 10 years from now, most of the jobs haven't been invented yet. So what are we even teaching those young people? Do we need to teach them to be flexible and adaptable and creative and to self-taught, maybe to go after their curiosity? How do we design a space that supports that?
Yeah.
Many questions.
Right. Yeah. And so for a project, so suppose hypothetically, if there's a project in, say, Paris, do you bring in a global team? Like how does that work concretely?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the project and also depends on the budget. But ideally, I like to do the first phase of the project on site with the founders. And also depending on the timeline, sometimes we do the design sprint and sometimes we just do everything online. Recently worked with a client in the US. The entire process was remote. But what was beautiful is that the local firm that we're working with, they also joined the workshop. And they was like, oh, we never spend so much time doing this part of the work, right? Because usually you just give a brief and the architect goes like,
sure.
Oh, I know what you need. And that's it. Like I heard a friend of mine bought a property in Costa Rica. And he called me and said, I heard it's a good idea to build 3-bedroom house. It's like, why? What are you going to do with the bedrooms? Like, how do you see your family? Do you want to work from home? Do you want to, how many kids you want to have? Like, let's talk about that before you create something that is going to last for so long.
Yeah. So rather than just having generic cookie cutter type of advice, I mean, another challenge I wonder if how do you deal with this is working with people from around the world brings its own unique challenges, right? Sort of people have their own cultural expectations and ways of working, and do you find that to be a challenge? Are there ways to make that process of working together beautiful, or do you find obstacles to that?
I think, well, obviously it has its challenges, right? So it's always good to set intentions and understand exactly what part of the work they want to engage in. Or are you talking about the clients or the team members?
I'm both, I suppose, just because of the cultural, the cross-cultural dynamics when you're working with people from different cultures.
Yeah. Funny because that first project in Japan, they had, so there are amazing architects in Japan, right? It's like it's known for its architects. And then they hired an architect and had a consulting session, the hotel project with him. But in Japan, it's not common to disagree with your client. So when they told him, we want to cancel the lobby and the public areas, and he's just like, it's a great idea, because it's rude to disagree. And I'm Israeli. I sometimes can't keep my opinions to myself, and I'm trying hard. So sometimes that culture difference worked in my favor, like this case. But in general, no, I haven't had any specific challenge with that. I think kind of people that I get to work with are already kind of open-minded and are seeking that something different. They're seeking something that is, bringing a new perspective. And they're encouraged. I like to challenge them. They're encouraged to think bigger and to question everything before we start. It's not just how many square meters we're going to build. It's really about what is, sometimes we'll start with, and this is something that I brought from experience design. Let's envision what emotions we want people to feel. Let's talk to their subconscious first and then create the atmosphere around that. How do we activate each sense to support that? And that's not quite unusual. And sometimes I'll have people, especially the construction guys, like sitting in the meeting and be like, I have to imagine what I want people to feel. I never did that in my entire life. But that's part of the process. That's important. This is what we remember.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, have you found challenges then with the nomadic aspect of working the way you do? Is it I suppose, well, you can't, like, not knowing where you'll be in 3-4 months. Is that how do you deal with that?
Honestly, I really love it. I love not knowing. I think after routine life, it's just something about it. There is something called openness to experiences. Are you familiar with that scale? It comes from the world of
the psychological.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
the personality type. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how likely are we to try new food or listen to new music or go to a country that doesn't speak English? For me, I guess my how I'm wired, the level of openness to experience that I need is quite high. Like, I love not knowing what's going to happen next week.
Right.
Because, like, now I'm in France. I wasn't planning on coming here. I got invited to a conference. I said yes. Then I said, well, if I'm here, I might as well spend some time somewhere beautiful. In terms of challenges, obviously being away from family and friends, that's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I do want to touch the materials. That's one thing. We're building a project in Portugal, and last year I was in Berlin, and we needed to finalize some of the colors for the walls and some of the tiles that we chose for the project. And I have my local team there, and they're doing incredible work, but I still want to see it, So am I just going to fly in to have a look at the materials? So instead, I found someone who is selling the same products from that company in Berlin, somewhere like 1 hour outside of the city. So I just went there and yeah. But yeah, that could be challenging for sure.
Yeah. And you've, I imagine, encountered others who are living this sort of nomadic lifestyle. Is there a way of building community in this way of life? Could you talk about how this is not an isolated experience, I suppose?
Oh no, it's
or an isolating experience.
Sometimes it's too social, to be honest. The
really?
location-independent movement and digital nomads grown so rapidly in the past few years. So I started 5.5 years ago, and it was still, in the making. But now there are hubs of nomads in different cities around the world. You have meetups groups. You have just like plug-in kind of communities that you can come and meet people. Also co-living. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of co-living.
I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Co-living, it's like the older brother of co-working, right? So it's intentional living in a community setting where you'll have a slightly smaller apartment in exchange of having some beautiful communal areas. Many of the guests in my podcast are co-living founders. And the early adopters of co-living, which is now booming and spreading all over the world, were nomads. Because you travel somewhere and you want to meet people that are not only tourists and they want to do sightseeing and move on. They want to stay there for a month or two, pretend they're locals, rent an apartment and meet the neighbors and all that. And co-living allows you to stay longer in places. It's usually fully furnished. And you get to meet a lot of awesome people from different places around the world. So that helps.
Wow. It's fascinating. So what are you looking forward to next as you move forward? What is exciting you, beyond the project that you mentioned that you're building?
Where to start? So many things. What excites me next? Honestly, it just keeps getting better all the time. So at the beginning, I was mostly hanging out with nomads who are, have some passive income and they have online businesses. And that's great because it helped me to get a better understanding of the lifestyle. How can you work not 8 hours a day? Maybe you structure your business in a way that you have some times that are more busy and some other times that you can recharge. And that's great. And I learned a lot from it and I'm super grateful. But something in me, looking for a bigger purpose, to connect with people who have bigger missions and they want not only to have their cocktail by the beach with the laptop, but also wants to create ripples of impact in the world by using the energy for a greater mission, like I'm feeling in my business. And I find myself seeking more those places like where we met, right? Places where people come to connect with other interesting minds and co-create. Then there are many seeds are being planted there, and some of them sprout a month later or 2 years later, and you never know what's coming next. So being part of those community makes me feel like I belong, makes me feel like I'm finding my tribe, and it's okay that I'm not satisfied with just 9 to 5, going back home and watching Netflix. That's okay that it's not for me. I'm craving adventure.
Right.
I'm craving deeper connections. And I'm willing to work really hard to make some impact in the way that we use our buildings. I don't know if you know that we spend about 90% of our time indoors. That's insane. 90% of our lives.
Yeah.
And we're so busy biohacking everything nowadays. We monitor our sleep and we wear those rings and we do ice baths and supplements. But we don't really talk about how the places that we live in are affecting how we think and how we feel and how what we see outside our windows shapes everything about us. And that's part of my own mission. There are many beautiful people around the world who are sharing this mission, and that makes me sleep better at night. But to be able to bring this message out and talk about it more and design spaces according to those factors, that's really excites me.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful purpose and mission, I suppose, to inhabit and to allow that to shape you. Do you find that this, I suppose, the community that you're building allows for friendships that are stable? Because I suppose that's another challenge as to how do you, if you're moving, really get to know people and build lasting friendships. How does that work?
I get this question quite often, and we just had a session about it in the conference I came from. It's interesting, right? So I think the loneliest I ever felt was when I was married. I had my job and I felt like I don't belong, and no one, I was surrounded with people, but I felt so alone. And I find that the kind of connections that I do as I go, as we're sharing the experiences together or having the same values and mission, that connects me with people on a deeper level. And then again, it's not about quantity of time we spend together. It's about quality of moments of connection. Some people I met along the way, they're close friends of mine, and we see each other once a year. But we're in touch all the time, and I can always call them and brainstorm together and come up with a crazy idea, and they'd be like, "Oh, let's go for it." And I want to. This is like one way I'm filtering the people in my life. So let's say you're going through a rough patch in business, because that happens from time to time. There's like one portion of people in my life that will be like, "How about you get a part-time job?" And the other one is, let's do a call and brainstorm together. Who can we introduce you to? Right? Using our collective resources to support each other. That's part of that new mindset that I'm so grateful to belong to.
Yeah, so it's creativity and then sort of more outward looking and more problem solving focused, as opposed to sort of resignation, right? And being, sort of, well, there's nothing more. I'm curious about that itch that you had about, is there more to life than this? Is that still around, or has that sort of been satisfied?
It's not satisfied. No one tells you this. That bucket list traveling kind of thing, right? So you have this list of places that you always want to go to, but no one tells you that it's not only that you go to those places and that's it. You also want to go back there. And you also discover new places you want to go to. So it's a never-ending cycle of curiosity. And there are still so many places that I haven't been to and I'm curious to experience. But also, this is quite a new understanding for me. I've been a proud nomad with a carry-on for over 5 years now. And I think it would be fun and scary and interesting to have some sort of a base somewhere. But now the question is where, right? It's like, I'm in love with so many places. How do I choose?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm waiting for it to become clearer. But yeah, I still want to travel. I still want to structure my year, even if I'll have a base, in a way that I'll go to somewhere new when there's a new culture and a new language. And I can, I always go deep into the culture, into what people used to do there before electricity was available, right? Before we could compensate for our mistakes with AC.
Yeah.
To understand what people used to do there. We're so excited about 0 miles construction nowadays. It's like, this is what we used to do thousands of years ago. That was the only choice. That was the only choice.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Things go full circle. Oh gosh. Do you have? I'm sure you've met a lot of folks along the way who are just simply aspiring to sitting on the beach with their laptop and a cocktail. Do you have any advice for people who are chasing that dream as to like what is a more meaningful or fulfilling way to work as a nomad?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's great when people break the script and they allow themselves to, even for a month, to go somewhere new and gain a new perspective. No shame. Like this is still great. And to be able to relax and go back to what is my own rhythm, as opposed to busy life, always being productive, always feeling guilty. Nomadism allow you to change the places you live in according to how much you can spend. Like some nomads go to Thailand, and there are places there you can live under $1,000 a month, and then they have time and headspace because they're not so busy paying their bills all the time to come up with new ideas. So sometimes we need that. But to answer your question, there's something called the fascination factor. It's an exercise in positioning. I think it's by Mark Levi, who it's basically a way to write a book, but I use it for other things. So to curate knowledge and to understand, you know how you have those stories that you keep telling or quotes that you like and things that you find personally inspiring. So he advised you to create a database of that. Just as, let's say 10 minutes a day, just write it down. Put everything on paper. I use Trello because I like Trello. But then after a while, when you have like a good amount of data, you start to see patterns. And you start to see the things that are fascinating for you and that kind of like spark something, you know, when your eyes lit, those things. And if we allow ourselves, and this is different for each person, and then you can see the things that are really exciting for you, and naturally you spend more time exploring them. And that's a great start, right? In being more connected to purpose. Ideas just come from there. But first of all, you have to make the effort to get to know ourselves, to say, what is a success for me? Do I want an office with 100 employees? Definitely not. Not my dream. For me, success is having free time. Success is to be able to spend 1 day a week studying, just going through like research and journals and this is wow.
I wonder if you might, the word success is just so, it's loaded because it has all of these connotations of wealth and status and so on. And it seems like you're talking about something like a beautiful life, right? Like a really rich conception of what a life well lived could look like and aspects of what that could,
Do we really have to wait until we are retired to love waking up in the morning? Is that something that we want to collaborate with? And do we need all those belongings? Probably not. I love beautiful items, don't get me wrong. But every time we buy something, one thing, we vote with our money. Who are we supporting? Like a big brand, family business and all that. And the other thing that we do, we exchange life for it. How much life did I have to spend? How many hours of work did I have to spend to buy this thing? And if we're honest about it, the best thing in life, once basic needs are met, they're free. It's a sunset, it's sharing a drink with a friend, or sitting with your father on the balcony, or it's like those sweet, beautiful moments in life. They're not expensive, they're accessible to us. And then we have more time.
Yeah, prioritizing them and structuring your life so that those things are privileged as opposed to sacrificed, right? Is the challenge for many of us.
We don't have to go through a life crisis to come closer to that. It seems like that we're always starting by pleasing others or the social scripts, and then we break free from that and say, oh, but what I actually want to do, how I want to live. And I just hope, maybe we can't do it this way. I hope that the gap will be smaller between those two things.
Yeah. Great. No, I'm curious as to whether this is part of what you do is to help others in a similar situation in some way, than to find this way of creating a beautiful life. Is that part of the movement that you built?
Hopefully, by modeling. And I do have people reaching out to me, students and architects who are like, oh, we also want to live nomadically. And from time to time, I do Q&A sessions to try and answer the questions all at the same time, because otherwise I would not have any time left. But I think the best thing we can do is just, live it yourself, walk the talk. That's all we can really do.
Great. Well, Adi, thank you so much for your time and for your insights. Where can our viewers and listeners find your work? Where would we direct them to?
Great place to start is our website. It's The New Movement. It's www.thenewmvt, because movement is kind of long, .com. Then my Instagram is also a great place to connect. It's Nomad Architect Me. And LinkedIn, feel free to reach out. I would really love to hear your thoughts. And thank you so much for having me. I'm really enjoying our conversations always, and today especially.
Fantastic. Well, thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this episode of Beauty at Work. Please be sure to check out our show notes for more resources from our guest. And if you like this episode, please be sure to share it with your friends. And please leave us an honest review. We'd love to hear what you think, and it helps to get the word out about our show. Music for the show was provided by Venkat Subramaniam, and the podcast was edited by Dave Visaya from Podcast Engineers. And thanks again to our two sponsors, Templeton Religion Trust and the Institute for Advanced Catholic Studies at the University of Southern California. For a research project on beauty and science, visit wellbeinginscience.com. To learn more about our broader project on beauty at work, visit beautyatwork.net. Thanks again, and see you next time.